Well, folks, I've come back from watching The Batman. Hence with that. By the way, that's on sale at Primark. Last time I checked, I think it's something like £6 for a T-shirt. Solid. Uh, I'm gonna say this as non-spoiler as possible. The 3 hours fly by. You don't even notice it go because you get so immersed in the story, and I think it's probably the first live-action Batman movie in the modern era where it's done with as a noir detective style, where you see things from Batman's perspective with him monologuing, keeping a diary, with the voiceovers and what have you. Pattinson, it's a very different Bruce Wayne slash Batman. He doesn't really do a lot of talking as Batman, and there's a fair level of accuracy with that because he's a thinking superhero. He chooses his words carefully, and you actually get to see, he's when you see him make certain looks, you can see he's working things out, and he acts, like I say, acts more like a true detective. Whereas, previous portrayals like with Keaton, it was more about, he didn't really have to work out Joker and Penguin in the Tim Burton series because they were fairly sort of easy to pull through. Christian Bale's one relied too much on gadgetry, whereas this one, he does have his gadgets and some really high-tech stuff in there. But, at the core of it, the gadgets are nothing if you don't have the person behind them using them correctly and using them to graph the details. Andy Serkis as Alfred Pennyworth. I think this is probably on par with Sir Michael Caine's portrayal, if not. When I say slightly more aggressive, I don't mean necessarily in terms of being violent and what have you, but he calls Bruce out on a lot of things, like saying, and this is not a spoiler because this is shown in the trailers, like, if this continues, you'll have nothing left. Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. He's not your traditional James Gordon, but for the performance he gives, it's well worth the money. He's very on point. He's no BS, and they could not have cast anyone better. Zoe Kravitz, her interpretation of Selena Kyle, because keep in mind, she is not Catwoman in this. She is a cat burglar, but she is not Catwoman per se. Her interpretation of Selena comes across as very astute, very very classy in a lot of respects, and there's a sultry essence to her. She speaks very soft spoken, tends to speak like this, that very sort of sultry and alluring tone and cadence in her voice, which it actually suits her. And has to be said, Zoe Kravitz with with a red wig, I'm digging that. I'm all over that. What can I say? Redheads are hot. Changed my mind. What else? Paul Dano. That boy was not acting. When you hear him with like the heavy breathing, it's like, okay, dude, I do not want to know what you're looking up on the internet, but stop. Seriously, just stop. But it's a much more messed up version of the Riddler. Now, you could make the argument that most incarnations of the Riddler are messed up. I mean, even though it was lighthearted with Batman Forever, Jim Carrey's Riddler, let's just say he's flown one too many times over the cuckoo's nest, but with his version, it was lighthearted, it was campy, and it was, it was something that the kids could watch. This version of the Riddler, do not let the kids watch this, considering in the UK, this is rated 15, so, yeah. What else? Colin Farrell as Penguin. you have to remind yourself when you see it in the credits, Colin Farrell, Oswald Cobblepot, Pengy, with the prosthetics and the accent he puts on, you don't even know. It's a similar way when Gary Oldman played Winston Churchill. With the accent and the mannerisms and the prosthetic makeup, you forget that it's Oldman. Except for one thing. Look around around his eyes, that's where you see Gary Oldman. The rest of it, if you didn't see the eyes, you wouldn't know any better. And the Batmobile. Hello, early Christmas present. This thing, damn. It's a very rough, more raw, rough around the edges Batmobile, but it's still got the iconic afterburner. I mean, this basically looks like a 69 Hot Rod Camaro on steroids, or caroids in this case. This thing's badass. I would say, just based on looking at this movie as is, I would say that this is a very, very close second to the Burton-mobile from 89-92, because everyone has their favourites, but for me, the most iconic and most Batmobile to outdo is the Tim Burton Batmobile. Changed my mind. But yeah, best advice I would give is when you go into this, go in with an open mind and low expectations, because if you're trying to compare this to, say, Batman 89 or Batman Begins, or even Batman v Superman, or heck, if you're trying to compare this to the Adam West Batman, don't. Just go in and appreciate it for what this is, because this is the 2020s version of Batman. This is not your daddy's Batman with Michael Keaton, is most definitely not your grandfather's version with the Adam West, but those versions are iconic and amazing for different reasons, but they're iconic and amazing equally. This is just a different interpretation of Batman, where Pattinson is stepping into some legendary shoes, through the likes of Keaton, Kilmer, Christian Bale. We don't talk about George Clooney, ever. You imagine something like, what about George Clooney? We don't talk about George Clooney. Well, what about, no. And then you imagine someone else, what about George Clooney? It's like, you're like a Batman fan. There's like a whole, like, cafe, of Batman fans. And it goes, I like the Batman and Robin. Everyone, just turns around and is like, we don't talk about that movie. Okay. Silly tangent, over with. Matt Reeves co-wrote and directed this, and for my money, I don't think they could have picked anyone better, because he is an amazing storyteller. If you've ever seen the last two of the Planet of the Apes trilogy, which he directed, it's just very, very good. Whether it's Oscar worthy, that's not for me to say. But one I do personally recommend as well is Let Me In, because it's a very different movie. It's one where you look at vampires as victims, in a sense. You look at what Cody Smith-McPhee's character is going through, and it's kind of paralleled with what Chloe Moretz's character went through, because she was given the ultimate bullying, because in the story, her uncle turned her. Yeah, not so fun. So, yeah. The Batman. If I was to give this a real features rating, I would say this is a must, but if you're someone who likes the 1 to 10 format, I would most definitely give this... I'll give this a 9. It's well worth the money. All I'm going to say is pick a time where it's going to be most convenient because you're going to be sat there for 3 hours. And that's not including the commercials and infomercials before that. So, yeah. But enjoyable, well worth the money, go watch.